while Dolores is coming to the panel. Mrs. Dolores Soler, it's a pleasure to have her here today in this conference. She is the president of the European Network of Work Promotion and Health Promotion at Work. She's been cooperating with us for a long time and implementing these kinds of programs to have good health habits at work. Well, thank you, Dolores. Well, thanks. I would like to thank the school for having invited me to take part in this conference. I hope I will learn a lot from what we see after my presentation as well. Okay, let's see. This is about promotion of health at work, but as a previous speaker, I'm going to change a little bit the objective of my speech. I'm not going to specifically talk about health promotion, but what companies can give and how they can cooperate to this active and healthy aging. That is the idea of my speech. The first consideration, and in the same line of my previous speaker, when we talk about aging, we talk about negative things, and it seems like we're talking about negative factors that we have to find a solution to. But the first consideration would be that aging is an achievement. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity, and we have seen that in the presentation of the conferences when we showed the active aging policies in Andalusia. We have managed to live longer. We had 62 years in the 50s, and in 2013 the life expectancy would be 79.3% for men and 85.2% for women. So it is actually an achievement. It is not a problem. But that aging poses certain kinds of circumstances and factors we have to pay attention to, so that we can have a better life. Obviously, on the one hand, we have the epidemic of chronic diseases, which appears not only with the elderly. It's true that as you get older, you're more prone to these chronic diseases, but it also affects young people and children. In Spain, and this is data which I collected from one of the speeches given here at the school, we talked about the chronic disease-free life expectancy. In Spain, it's 38 years for men, and 41 years for women. So when they talk about strategies of 45 plus, 35 plus, not even in those strategies they would go, and they should be part of those strategies. The topic of chronic diseases, and also we have the fact that after 65 years old our life expectancy is much higher. In the 50s we had 12 years. In 2011 we could reach 20 years, 18 for men and 22 for women. So still live for very long after those 65 years old. On the other hand, we have these retirement which is linked to baby boom. In the United States they're preparing for that in 2020, but for us this tsunami of retirement will appear in 2040. What does that mean? Well, we're talking a lot about unemployment, etc., but in 2040 we will not have enough active people who can work, because we will have a lot of retirement, and we have to give an answer to this. This is how everything will evolve, this age pyramid here in Spain. as years go by. As you can see, the pyramid in 2049 is changing, and for each 10 people with working capacity, we will have 9 potentially inactive people here, and they will be older than 65. We have to do something about this. It is not a problem, but we have to face certain factors. What effects and what challenges are presented here? The increase of retirement in the European Union, that would be from 2020, more than 2 million a year. The increase of retirement pensions to be paid. In 2010 we had 8.9% of GDP, but in 2050 that would be 15.5%. The decrease of working population, sustainability of these pensions system. When it comes to work health and labor health, we have these epidemic of chronic diseases in our working population and the reduction of the capacity for work. So, what can we do about this? I guess you know this image. It's a multidimensional model developed by the Institute for Security, Safety and Hygiene at Work. Here they show the basis for working capacity. This working capacity does not depend exclusively on the age of the worker, obviously, but the fact of having or not a good balance between personal characteristics and working conditions. These working conditions understood not only as physical working conditions but also social and mental working conditions. So the idea would be to keep that balance between personal characteristics and working characteristics. Of course, the basis will be health and functional capacity of workers, but a second point to take into account would be competence, knowledge, ability, skills, their attitudes as well, and their values. And all of that will define this working capacity in relation to working conditions. All these stages, all these floors are interrelated, and well, as you can see, they give us these details, like for example that balcony, saying, well, it's not only work health or health at work, there are other factors outside the person and outside the labor world which can have an effect on these motivation, competencies and health. So we should have those factors into account as well. Family, social life, how working conditions change, all of that. So the capacity for work, the basic message would be it doesn't depend on age exclusively, and we talk about different workers, capacities and working conditions, and from then we have to build our activities in the field of work. What is the objective? Well, to be very clear, there are two main big objectives that we might have: to have the best possible health, and that's where it links to health promotion, and these working conditions would be compatible for the majority of people. How can we do that? We can do that from prevention services, health promotion services, companies with the surveilling this working capacity, promoting health and designing for everybody. And I'm not saying anything new. Those of you who are within this labor world, this is what we usually do daily. It is our main objective. But sometimes we include some other voluntary topics like health promotion.
We've seen the slope that was shown to us by the prior speaker in terms of that we cannot stop aging, but we may make that slope get closer to that upper line, so our functionality traits will depend on our ways of acting in ourselves, but also they will have to do with working conditions. And how will we be working around that? Promoting health, taking into account working conditions, empowering the worker, and turning working places into healthy places. Also that they are of course safe places which can promote healthy choices. And another issue is the disability threshold. Disability itself is conditioned by the context. A worker may be suffering from a series of limitations, and the context may make that person to fulfill his or her job without any problem. So where is the disability threshold in a working place? It is not lying in the limitations of the worker, but in the working conditions. And there are job places and posts which can be fulfilled by everyone, but there are some critical jobs which cannot be fulfilled by everyone. But in most of them, if we maintain requirements below resources, there will be no problem. That disability will not be that apparent, because disability is conditioned by the context, of course, with a series of exceptions. And which would be the ideal situation? Promotion versus labor risks, and the maintenance of demands below resources, the availability of resources. There are certain moments at which these cannot be done, and certain decrease of those capacities appears. So we should monitor when those moments appear in order to bring the slope upwards again, be it modifying the working conditions or the conditions proper to the worker. And that leads us on to a new way of managing health at work. It's a kind of management which should be done not just from the point of view of risk management, but from the point of view of management of well-being, so that worker with no risk factors can maintain that line of lack of risk. And all throughout all the different tiers will be acting on well-being management, the management of demands when the worker fall ill. What is it that we can do? We can do more things in order to facilitate a healthy and safe comeback. The management of disease from labor health, the point of view of labor health, we may help patients to promote treatment compliance. We should promote the permanence of workers at their place of work, of course, as long as they want. We must facilitate their coming back to work, and we should facilitate the integration of those workers who are outside the labor market but who should be there without very big problems, and always from the point of view of balance on the action of the person and the environment. Because when we speak about the promotion of health at work, we refer to habits, to uses, to bad habits. It is the worker who's not sleeping enough, or not doing the best for their diet, or not moving. But there are working environments which condition that even if you know how to have a healthy diet, you cannot follow everything that is being said to us in terms of enjoying a healthy diet. So always there should be always a balance between the actions on the person and the environment. Everything I'm saying, as Inma Mateo was mentioning, is being developed since 1996 at the European Network for Health Promotion at Work, and we tried to reach a consensus on the definition of what we thought that health at the working place should be. There were 15 countries as members in that network. We had sociologists, doctors, physical therapists, specialists in human resources, so it's quite a diverse network, and that helped us launch this declaration, this definition, from the point of view of different approaches. And in fact, this definition, the promotion of the of health at work, it means joining efforts by employers, workers and society in order to improve health and well-being of people at the working place. And how? By improving the organization and the working conditions, and promoting active participation and promoting individual development. And we may draw all actions we want to be developed at the working place, and which subjects should be dealt with. I've just placed a few examples, but I enlarge a little bit the issue of sleep, which is quite important from the point of view of health and health conditions, and also from the point of view of traditional issues such as labor accidents. Sleep should be taken into account. Also nutrition, chronic diseases, physical activity, mental health. As the prior speakers said, we should work on a variety of factors, and of course always take into account what we intend to promote. I'm not going to deal more with issues having to do with health promotions. You've got the European website here. You'll find the results of the new initiatives developed by the network. It's in English. In Spanish, you've got the portal on the promotion of health at work by the National Institution for Health and Safety at Work, and there's a lot of information there. And any criticism we will be open to them. We'll try to cover all needs put forward by you and by the portal users. These are a series of products which can be used. These are all these products have got to do with health. We've got a product stemming from the 5th initiative, the European initiative for the promotion of health at work. So there are models out there which exists and function. Of course, we won't be able to apply all these initiatives to the last beat or detail, but we will be able to draw ideas in order to apply them on the area. The healthy work at an aging Europe, which was also translated by this institution, by the Andalusian School for Public Health. And I've also got this guide for the promotion of healthy work for workers with chronic diseases, and also recommendations both at the national and international level for companies in terms of managing adequately chronic diseases. But the moment, of course, when the worker is limited or disabled to an extent, there's an impact on health, on the performance of the company at the company, and we've got to monitor when that appears. So the working ability monitoring can be done at the periodic health checks, and also by other services of the company. And there's a tool here we would like to validate from our institution, which is the Index of Labor Capacity of the Finnish Institute. They've been working on these subjects since 1990, and they enjoy a long experience on the subject. It's been improved with time, and it's a questionnaire which can help us. It can help us open doors at the company, so we may study the ability of workers' objectives, early detection, identification of risk factors. We may have it within the need and the subject, the ability. It can be applied in a periodic fashion. It gives us an index for the group or the sample being studied, and there are some 7 questioning models on the ability having to do with the current moment. I don't want to bother you with too much information. And what this questionnaire does is to split the population we're studying into 4 groups with good average bad or very bad ability, and of course what we're searching is not to get rid of those with a very bad ability, but rather looking trying to find when to designate that those conditions are met, so we can improve the conditions, the working conditions, and so those who in the lower categories can reach the upper ones. Another message I want to transmit to you is speaking about abilities and not limitations, and you see that I'm not any longer referring to age, because any age may be posed with difficulties, but at all ages we've got capacities. In terms of working capacities, and if we see what might be interesting in terms of age, what we should be focusing our attention on, there are some 5 or 6 factors to be taken into account apart from those which are unique to the worker, on which should I pay attention to when I'm studying the working conditions. Factors having to do with the lack of autonomy, because older workers maybe need a little bit more time, and the lack of autonomy may create a certain level of stress. Factors having to do with physical load. In that sense, I would like to tell you that things which are usually not good for older workers are also not good for the youngers, because sometimes a person was asked to raise 50 kilo cement sacks, and that's not good neither for the older nor for the younger worker, because we've got to start from a baseline which means abiding by the health and safety regulations at work. We develop, for example, certain intolerance to shifts when we're older. Then is it because of age, or maybe because we accumulated quite a bit of fatigue? Early aging, factors having to do with changes in the organization, technological change, working procedures, especially if they are harsh. Any harsh change introduces a disorder in the performance of a worker, but maybe it can create more anxiety for an older worker. For example, I was just placed a computer on top of my desktop, and they told me, here you go, that's your new working tool, and then I was supposed to do things on my own, and you cannot do things like that. You've got to introduce changes in a steady fashion, and of course take into account the exchange of information, and there are cumulative elements such as temperature, radiations, risk of cancers, environments, etc. And from health at work, we've got to reach the best health conditions for all. And this is a slide I wanted to finish with. Aging is an achievement of our society, but also an opportunity for companies, and we've got evidences on that. This is so far what I wanted to tell you. Thank you for your time. Yeah, Manuel, maybe you can come up in case the audience wants to ask any questions to the speakers. Many years ago, I recall having big arguments with my wife, because she said that we had a problem, and I said we didn't have any problem. What we truly had, and what we had in many countries, specifically in Spain, was an excess population which justified all the migrations to South America, Central Europe, etc. A populational excess. with more than our head is possible to covering, and the economic possibilities of the country. So if there's an excess population, either we have retired citizens or unemployed persons. What's the difference between having to support 6 million retired citizens than 6 million unemployed people? I would rather cover the needs of the retired citizens because they are happy because they are already retired, than having to support unemployed people. So what I'm concerned about is whatever the situation that people are in, that they are happy. And there's something I would like to listen when we speak about health at work, and it is that all weeping should have been done at home. You cry a little bit before the mirror, so you reach your place of work already happy. And the problem we have at the working place is that there are many toxic people, and they embitter our lives, the lives of their partner. Yesterday I went through a very interesting lessons. The people who were cleaning the manure of the riding place. I brought my little girl to their riding classes, and yesterday on the other hand, I met a series of university teachers, and they were complaining about the working conditions and how things were there. So I think, and I defend a healthy lifestyle, but much more than thinking on what we can do is how approach what we should do. And I think that message is a very important one from the point of view of companies, of the managerial levels, and it is take into account how important it is to enjoy yourself when you do whatever you do. Well, there's another remark I would like to make. Working is also a healthy process. The problem is that in many cases we have working conditions in which from which we draw no satisfaction. Work is too much intensified in some environments. So what is that we defend from the area of health at work? That working conditions should be improved, not just in physical terms, but also in social and mental, in the mental environment. So that way we'll go to work very happy. The disappointment of workers comes not just or not because people are unhappy. Well, there are always some toxic elements, but there are many workers whose work is never recognized, never acknowledged, and people whose salary is just miserable. Some years ago, if you earned €1,000, that was something deplorable. But now it's like, wow, you're so lucky that you get €1,000 a month. So working conditions should promote being happy at work and that you're doing what you've been educated for. So we're not saying anything which is different. It's a kind of discourse of speech on working conditions, and that's something I do not agree with the mainstream current. Whatever that is out there in your family, your friends, etc., has an influence on you, and it is good for you to work to speak about those things with your colleagues. Of course, not those who will come crying to work every day. Sometimes they will go through a very bad period, and that's to be understood. But creating conditions which promote an exchange of feelings, of emotions, is always positive. And as a worker, as an aging person, and as a person, I am a unique being. And you go to work, you go to cinema, you practice sports, and you will always bring your head with yourself, and you will care about your feelings. And so in order to promote health at work, we should think of that global concept of health. It's a kind of a whole, and that's a whole I should approach. And who would be paying for all that? What should be compulsory and which elements shouldn't be compulsory? And that's where collective bargaining enters into play. I'm sorry, the gentleman has not switched on the microphone, and so we cannot get any sound from the interpreter's booth. I'm sorry, cannot hear the gentleman because the microphone is not on. Institutions speak about the national system of healthcare, but they're not promoting that. We should be oriented towards not just the prevention of disease, but also towards promoting health everywhere. Yeah, that's the kind of speech I try to follow, the promotion of health. Un mensaje muy sencillo. En lugar de hablar de sistemas de salud instead of talking about health systems oriented towards disease, we should be talking about systems which are approaching or promoting health and well-being, not just focusing on disease. Yo querría responder a lo que se acaba de comentar. Bueno, es muy interesante que hayan planteado esta cuestión, porque yo querría explicar que en la actualidad pues estoy estudiando, soy estudiante nuevo. Asisto a clases a la Facultad de Medicina, de Salud Pública y Medicina Tropical, y tenemos a Martin
this school here, and he put up on the slide a death certification about what was the cause of death of a man who'd been dead for 3 weeks before he was found, and then he put underneath what was the cause of death, and he said heart disease, embolism, underlying diabetes. And all the medics in the room put their hand up, and he said what was the cause of death, and they said it was the heart disease, or it was the diabetes, or it was the embolism. And I put my hand up and said it was the loneliness. He'd been dead for 3 weeks before he was found, and our Secretary of State for Health in the UK, Jeremy Hunt, spoke at a social work conference last month and said that we are in a terrible situation with the loneliness of older people, that they lack the intimacy that we were talking about earlier. They are lonely and isolated. And I think this is a big contribution to their early death, because it's almost as if people are giving up. So I think you're right, but I think we have to train the way we train, change the way we train medical students, because they will always look for the medical or the disease aspect and not the health or well-being aspect. So we're distorting the picture in the way we train our doctors and sometimes our nurses as well.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Buenas tardes, soy Enrique Ranchado del Hospital.
Good morning. I would like to ask Dolores Soler if you consider aging or the aging factor as a factor of special sensitivity, taking into account that it means that you've been working for quite a long time, and as you mentioned, the issue of shifts, taking into account that there are papers relating lack of sleep and breast cancer. Maybe after a certain age, nurses who are older than a certain age, they could have a choice towards not choosing a night shift. So do you think that the age factor to be very important because of biological considerations?
No, from health of the workplace, we have a worker with certain characteristics, personal characteristics, and we can do a general risk evaluation according to the working conditions, so that we can have access to those risk factors which could be especially interesting or especially problematic for those for old age workers. But from this is when it comes to risk assessment. But when we do these risk assessment, we could establish these factors for what? To improve them. Because if we improve them for older people, we will have improved them for younger people. Those shifts, working shifts, are not good for anyone if we think about physiology. And we can talk about the social level as well. That is where we go into age as a risk factor. Well, no. Age is something to be taken into account in each worker and their working conditions. I don't know if I am explaining myself good enough. The fact that people retire, for example, pregnant women, they work with shifts and out of shifts. And why? Each pregnant woman and each pregnancy is a different story. So it depends on the context, because maybe you're adding some stress. So in general, and we should study it in particular to apply it. Well, no, the retirement 55 of all firemen. Why? Well, we have a change of shift, not a retirement. But why? Talk to the worker and have a look at what problems they might have, if they have any kind of limitation. The best thing for this change in shifts, that would be the actual worker saying, well, I have a problem with my working shifts, but not saying, well, from 30 years old on, out of shifts. Am I explaining myself? This is a general idea. Well, I'm going to bring this idea to my field and to get to know a little bit the physiology of this idea. It's very important to know the biological rhythm of each one and where it is situated. 20% of people are morning people, and they're like early birds, and they 20% of the other people are afternoon or evening people, and we go to bed very late. Yesterday I went to bed at 4 in the morning. I started to prepare my talk at 2. We are owls. 60% are like neither one thing or the other. So the problem is not working at night or working in the morning. The problem is to have to be in the wrong shift, in the wrong working hours. I'm not related to the clinical sphere, because I cannot start work at 8. I start to work at 11. I wouldn't find it difficult to keep on working until very late. And it's known that addictions, for example, alcohol, smoking, are much more frequent in those people who have these change in shifts. Those people who are, for example, afternoon or evening people, and they are made to work early in the morning. These addictions are much more frequent in these kind of people. This has to be recognized and seen by our bosses, and we should be given that freedom. Even in the case of students and adolescents with whom I work, physiologically, they are afternoon or evening or night people, and they are obliged to keep this studying time or working time, for example, starting high school at 8 in the morning, in the process of growing up with these different sleeping habits and sleeping periods, they are obliged to sleep more hours and to later hours. At the beginning, with our ancestors, we had people who got up very early to go search for food, and other people just stayed in the cave during the night and to protect it. So both of them were necessary. And the thing that nowadays we have of changing the shifts and just organizing it according to sometimes mere lack, it's something that we should consider. Thank you very much. We have to finish because we have a coffee break right now, and we have 2 round tables later on. I'm done. A very short intervention. Okay, that's fine. In room 3, you have coffee and an exhibition, and later on we will continue here. Thank you. Please come back at 12, a quarter past 12, so that we can catch up with our schedule. Thank you. In room 3, you have the posters and the different materials that you have sent. Thank you.